Today I'm going to show you guys how to do an oil change on a 2017 CBR1000rr. So the first thing we're going to do is take off this lower fairing. This is a race fairing, but it's pretty much the same procedure to take off your regular fairing. There'll be 3 bolts here, 1 bolt here, and 1 bolt here on the stock ones. Again, on your stock fairings, you're not going to want to use power tools. You're going to want to use hand tools, just because it'll save your bolts. I use power tools though, because these are just whatever bolts. All right, get this off. We already did the other side, so as you see, it pops right off. I'm going to cut the safety wire on it, but while I do that, the bike has to be warm as per the book's instructions. And what that does is it helps take all the oil and mix it up in there and get some of the debris floating around, so that when you drain it out and it's warm, it comes out and it doesn't just collect down here at the bottom. So we're going to turn this on. All right, she's warmed up pretty good, and we removed all the safety wire for the track day. We take off the filler cap, and there is an O-ring here that goes around it. Well, you know, we can just leave it in there because it's just going to go right back on. I tend to tighten it. This is just the dipstick. I'll loosen it. It doesn't have to come out right this second. And now we're going to get our drain pan and place it under the bike. So get ready to catch all the stuff that's going to come out of it. It's going to be a 12mm socket to take out the oil plug. So I get on this one here. Make sure I'm taking this the right way. Yep, it's the right way. And we're going to take it off. There it goes. Now, there we go. According to the book, this should be done at where was it? At 600 miles, at 8,000 miles, and at 16,000 miles. And the oil filter, according to the book, is done at the first 600 miles and first 16,000 miles. Now, these intervals are for people who ride the way the book suggests. And of course, everybody's going to tell you something different when it comes to changing oil. It's hotly debated. But the book suggests that you ride the motorcycle from 0 to 10 miles an hour, and then in first gear, and then from 10 to 20 miles an hour in second gear, and then from 20 to 30 miles an hour in third gear. And I can tell you, nobody rides like that. So even your most conservative riders. So now I'm going to take this 2132 socket for the Canon the Canon oil filter I have on there, because it has a nut built into it. And again, another hotly debated thing is which oil filters you're going to use and which oil to use. And you ask any mechanic or motorcycle rider, and they're all going to have a different answer for you. A lot of people don't like K&N because they had a recall not too long ago that caused a lot of people's bikes to blow up. Oops, I'm going to take out this little C-clamp. And they issued the recall, and I'm sure it left a bitter taste in a lot of motorcyclists' mouth. But I've never had a problem with them. And I like using them because you don't have to have a specialized oil filter wrench to put them on and tighten them to torque. Because they already have a little built-in nut on it. But if it burned you, I could see why you wouldn't want to use their products anymore. So I'm going to take it off right there. Oh, there it goes. And you can see the nut that's on the back of the filter there. Makes things real convenient for taking it on and then tighten it back up to torque. They even have a hole here for your safety wire so that you don't have to use this. The thing is that a lot of the racing organizations won't let you use that hole, which is kind of crazy. You have to use this and drill a hole in it, and it's something else. But we do it because that's what we have to do. Now, if you're not racing, you don't have to safety wire your oil filter. Just put it back on there to torque specifications. If you are racing, though, they're going to make you do it. And it's probably a good idea if you don't use a torque wrench just to safety wire it, because at least every other track day someone drops oil on the track. It's annoying. And it can be dangerous. So here's the sealing washer. We have to use a new one. Because that's what it says in the book. You could probably use any one, but since this is attached to the engine, I'm going to use a Honda one, which is over here. And it's going to be part number 94109-12000. That's this. It's just a sealing washer. You can look it up online, and you could honestly probably use a generic one. I don't, though. But you could. And that's just to prevent leaks from coming out of your drain plug. So we're going to let that drain a little bit more. I'm going to use Mobil 1 synthetic. And of course, depending on who you ask, from one motorcycle to another, they're going to tell you, oh, that oil's garbage, or this is what you got to use. I just use it because it's readily available at Walmart for $10. It's pretty cheap. There are tons of options out there, and honestly, I don't think it matters so long as you change your oil frequently. So I'm going to go ahead. It's got the new sealing washer. I'm going to plug it back up, and I'll just let you guys know that I changed my oil. Depending on how I ride it. If I'm gentle, which I hardly ever am, but if I'm gentle with the oil or with the bike, I'll change it at most every 4,000 miles with the filter. If I have a track day, then I'll do 2,000 miles and then the track day and then change. If I have 2 track days, then I'll just change it after 2 track days. Because you rev the engine so high, it bounces off of red line with the track days. It's really a lot more wear than your normal everyday riding. So I got that on there, hand tight. We got our new oil filter, and we're going to have to tighten the bottom one there to torque. Now, some people say that you should let the bike drain. And some people will even go as far as to let it drain overnight to get all the old oil out of the bike. I think that's a little much. See, there's a lot more that just came out. I don't think you should have to do that, honestly. I think if you just let it drain for 5 or 10 minutes, that's good enough, and put it back in there. But if you want to go the extra mile and just leave all this stuff off, let it drain overnight, it's your bike. You're more than welcome to do that. I'm not going to worry about it. So finger tight that down. Let's see, according to the book, oil filter plug has to be installed at 30 Newton meters. I'll get my handy dandy torque wrench. Alright, so we got our torque wrench. It's going to be all the way at the very end of this torque wrench's capability. And typically when you want to use a torque wrench, you want all the torque values to be in the middle of the torque wrench's capabilities, because that's where it's most accurate. Once you get too light or too heavy on either side of its abilities to measure torque accurately, you have the most degree of variance, where it's more inaccurate. But I don't have another torque wrench, so I'm just going to use the one I have here. And then I'll safety wire it for good measure. There you go. That's good. And there's my safety wire hole, so it's in the same orientation it was before. All right. Now we get the new oil filter. And we change the oil. Now, some people just, well, everyone coats the oil filter gasket with new oil before you put it on. That's even in cars, and that's just so it doesn't stick on there. And you want to inspect the surface of the surface to make sure there's not an old oil filter gasket on there. I've had that happen, not on motorcycles, but in cars. And then I do the extra mile of filling up the oil filter with oil. So we know that this little bit amount of oil is also filtered. I don't know how important this step is, or if you should really even have to do this, but I've always done it. And I think never had bad results. The only thing that I don't like about doing this method, especially with when the filter's mounted like this, is it could fall out on you. The oil will fall out, and then you're not filling it up to spec. And the spec for this is 2.9 quarts with an oil filter change. But I normally just do 3 quarts. It's a little more, but I'm pretty confident I'm going to burn it off. All right, so I'll put it on there, and see I lost a little bit of oil. And hand tighten it, make sure it sits there perfectly. And just hand tighten. And it needs on cars it's okay to tighten your oil filter hand tight, I think, but not on motorcycles. On motorcycles, you need to tighten it to the specific torque. So you don't want to leak oil at all. Oil filter, 26 Newton meters. So we'll do 26 Newton meters. Because that is how torqued the oil filter has to be. And we'll get to tightening it. Uh-oh. It doesn't want to fit in there. We're going to have to use our extension. Use an extension. Now, if you use an extension on a torque wrench, there's a formula for how many inches an extension requires to make sure the torque is where it needs to be. So I'm just going to set it slightly higher than 26 Newton meters since I'm using the extension. There we go. Put it at 27. So we're going to lose some torque value because we got a kind of a long extension on there, but not a whole lot. There we go, that's good. And we'll safety wire that as well, so it has no chance of moving. All right, we got our oil filter in, or oil plug in. Now we're ready to add oil. Get our funnel. And pour it in. Like I said, 3 quarts, well, 2.9 quarts, but we just dropped some oil in the oil filter process, so pretty confident that's about going to be 2.9 quarts. Using nice and easy. Okay, there's 1 quart. Don't have to turn this all the way upside down. There's 1, and then you want to save these to put your old oil in later when you take it to the shop to get recycled. But yeah, there'll be people who will tell you, oh, you change your oil every 2 track days? That's way too much. And you'll have the same guy with the same amount of experience tell you, oh, you should be changing your oil every track day. So I just kind of go with what I'm comfortable with. And I think 2,000 miles of street riding in 1 track day warrants an oil change. I just did 2 days in Barber, just playing around, you know, around 10,000 to 13,000 RPMs the whole day. Definitely think it warrants an oil change. This last one. And then, like I said, on the street, I'm probably riding more aggressively than I should. So I would say at most 4,000 miles. But oil is expensive, motorcycle oil especially, at $10 a quart, and the filter's like 12 bucks. So but just upon inspection of the oil that came out there, it looked pretty gross. So I think it's about right on par. We had about 1,500 street miles and 2 full track days on it. So it's time. I definitely think what the book tells you is way too much. Every 8,000 miles is ridiculous. But, you know, we're not riding. Very few people go out and buy a sport bike and ride it like an economy car. Not that it doesn't happen, just unlikely. All right, so it's all good to go. And we're going to put our cap back on there. The book says the cap goes on at 6 Newton meters. I'm just going to put it on there as tight as my hands can put it on there. And I'll more than likely end up safety wiring it shut anyway. But you definitely want it to be a tight seal because this is a closed system, and if there's any air leaking, it'll set off a check engine light. So if you do get a check engine light, make sure your oil filter plug's tight. All right, so we're all tightened down to torque and everything. Let's kick it back on and make sure it works, and we'll check the levels and make sure all that's good, though it should be fine since take out that dipstick now and figure see how we're looking. This is a R&G case saver. If you guys are in the market for case savers, I would highly advise against an R&G case saver. They suck. maybe go Woodcraft or something. I don't like it because I had to Dremel out these holes to make all the stock plugs work. And I just don't feel like you should have to do that it should work just fine without any of that, without having to cut it away. Especially for a name brand like R&G. Oh, poop. All right, so when you're checking the oil, there's no, you don't do that. The bike needs to be level, completely vertical, and you don't do that. So we're just gonna stick it in without twisting it. Boom, that's it. Pull it out. There's the oil right in the middle, slightly higher, but it's okay, it'll burn. That's perfect amount of oil. And ta-da! The oil's changed. Now all we gotta do is put the safety wire stuff back on for the race, and that's it. And oh, and the bottom fairing. But that's really all there is to changing the oil.